my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to my July roll for TBR, my TBRPG. We are going to real quick, probably not that quick, go over how the month of June went for me, then jump into the rolls with some assistants of mine that have come to visit for the 4th. But first, how did June go as a whole? It was a mixed bag. The problem is that half of those 8 rolls that I rolled last month were all 400 plus page books. So I only read the 8. No, I take that back. I read 9. I got up to 9, but that's the lowest I've read so far this year. Most of the time I get 10 or above. I think I gotten up to like 13 or 14 one month, so I was a little bit bummed by that. But considering I still read a ton page count wise, I'm not too bummed about that. I didn't get the Nat win because I despised one of the books I picked so much I couldn't finish it. Even with only 100 pages to go, the idea of reading that last 100 pages just infuriated me. So we're not going to do that, although I am glad that I filmed that because that is some great content. Regardless, let's jump into the actual books themselves. What did I read? Up first, we have House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. This is a sapphic gothic horror all about a young woman who is living in the slums and takes a chance to get out of the slums by becoming a blood maid. In this world, the nobles will hire blood maids to drink their blood, and that is like a medical cure. It kind of relies on the myth of drinking blood as actually curing illnesses being real. But she goes, even though it's kind of like a scandalous thing to be a blood maid. It's not exactly like a sex worker, but it's not like a sex worker. And at first I was like, oh, vampires. This is going to be a vampire thing. But no vampires. Literally just human nobility at drinking blood, which is an analogy in itself. But she falls in with the House of Hunger of the title and its mysterious Countess Elizabeth. And she begins to uncover dark secrets. And I feel like this book got kind of shit on in ways it probably didn't deserve, because I think the marketing for it did not do it any favors, because I've seen a lot of people that focus on the fact that it's sapphic. Like even the indie book store that I got it from like labeled it with the rainbow sticker, but this isn't a romance. It's gothic horror. Like, yeah, the protagonist is sapphic and there is a sapphic romance in it, but if you go in expecting romance, you're gonna be disappointed. like really disappointed. If you like twisted, messy, dark sapphics, you're right on board. Now, I do love twisted, messy, dark sapphics, so I did like it. There were some issues with the pacing, and I don't know how it could have been fixed necessarily, but I did feel like the buildup was a little bit stuttery for me, but there's a lot of gore. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about blood because these aren't vampires, so it's not like a bite. Well, for the most part, not bite. It is like actually like you have to go sit in a chair and you hold out your arm and they, that way. Which I'm not gonna lie, part of me was screaming because like when it's vampire fiction, I can let it go, right? I can like make up some way to like bridge the gap in my head with the blood drawing, because like, oh yeah, vampires don't need that much, or oh, their saliva does something to help, or the vampires can give a little bit of their blood back to like make up for the loss. Because as someone who is a lifetime blood donor, I have just come across I think 4 gallons of blood in my lifetime. Like, part of me was screaming, that's not healthy, that's not how you do it, like, the entire time, which is the point. Like, they bring it up that these girls aren't healthy being blood maids. It's just, that was a constant, never-ending thing in the back of my brain, where I was thinking about, like, bloodborne pathogens, and those are not single-use needles, I know they're not, like, it was just a constant thing, but the ending was big and messy and gothic horror-y, so definitely do not go into this one. If you're just here for the queer shit, you need to be here for the messy, dark, twisted queer shit, and then you'll have a good time. Up next, we have The Penwith Curse by Catherine Coulter. This is a reread. This was the first ever book with a sex scene I'd ever read. On a youth group missions trip, I was properly scandalized as a preteen, and I wanted to go back to it just to see. And I was surprised by how much I remembered. I must have reread the old copy I had back in the day a lot or something, probably because it was the first book I had that had a sex scene. But I remembered a lot. And again, yeah, it does not hold up very well. There's a lot of very iffy things in the relationship. You have Bishop, who has been tasked to break the curse of Penwith, and basically any man that tries to take over and force the young heiress into his bed has died mysteriously, and the king still refuses to let the woman leave because the woman cannot lead, how dare she. And so Bishop is sent there to break the curse, and there is also a non-linear storytelling because somehow these two in the modern day are connected to this old warlock just called Prince and a witch named Brisha, and somehow they have to do a thing in the modern day to complete something. And I did remember a lot from it, but also there were so many moments that would get this book canceled today. The first half of both of the relationships, because you watch both of the romances play out, the guys are just, they're rapey assholes. Like, that's, I don't know how else to put that. But then, like, suddenly, partway through the romance, I don't know if the author just gave up trying to do, like, an actual slow burn. She just has them flip, and then suddenly the guys are cool now. And it's like, you did not think that through. I'm pretty sure the author, like, painted herself in a corner with guys that weren't great and then realized how not great the guys were, so she just had them have a sudden change of heart because so much of the plot up until that point had been reliant on their assholery. So she just had to, like, have them suddenly have a change of heart so that they wouldn't be assholes by the end of the romance. Like, it was definitely a book that will not hold up to scrutiny at all. It is, I want to say of its time, but even then, like, it's not that long ago, right? Like, I think this is early 2000s. Yeah, 2003. It is the third book or something in a romance series. I am not going to continue. I read this one for the nostalgia, and this one will always be representative of a major shift in my youth, but for the most part, I'm ready to just put this whole thing away and move on. Up next, we have Falling for the Mark by Dominique Davis. This is a new adult contemporary sapphic romance all about a mother-daughter con artist duo who trick rich men into giving them money by having the mother start a relationship with them, get married with a prenup, and then the daughter seduces them, causing them to break the prenup and get all the money. But their latest Mark has a daughter of his own, Kennedy, and the con artist's daughter, Maya, falls in love with her, and thus issues begin to happen. And I loved the premise because I, once again, love messy sapphics. And so I was like, yes, mess, drama, angst, let's go. The thing is that the actual narrative doesn't really live up to the mess and drama of the premise. In fact, there's at one point where Maya's mother literally tells her, hey, it's time to up the stakes. This dude sees you as too much of a daughter figure right now. If you don't start acting more sexual around him, he might not fall for the seduction after the marriage. Like, you gotta step it out now. And Maya just doesn't, and that doesn't cause, like, an issue. Like, she doesn't start arguing with her mother over the fact that she, disobeyed the direct order to up the ante. She just doesn't do it and nothing happens. And there's a lot of that where there should be more drama and angst and that kind of melodrama, because this is a melodrama soap opera-esque premise here, but it doesn't really have any of that. And the writing style itself was a little bit stilted. For example, there are scenes where characters are falling down drunk. Literally. They literally fall down drunk, but they're speaking in full coherent sentences with, like, nickel words, like the $5 words. And it did not feel realistic, and everyone kind of spoke with that same kind of formal cadence so that it was really hard to differentiate one character from another. But just in general, I wish it had gone full mess. I wish it had really pulled back on the formal language to let the emotions come through a lot more, because you have a lot of emotions. Maya's carrying a lot of emotions from her father abandoning them, and Kennedy is still grieving the death of her mother, and there was a whole bunch of stuff to dig into there, but the language held it back because it told things as opposed to showing the effects of the emotions, and everyone was just speaking their emotions in plain out therapy language. So it didn't hit as hard, but the premise is still there. I'm not going to continue with that series, but I am always happy to add another messy sapphic book to my list. Up next, Soulscape by K.R. Stevenson, another chunky book for review. This one is a high fantasy Beauty and the Beast retelling about a young woman who is in the middle of fighting against an evil empire and ends up, because of plot, washing up on the shores of this island where, wouldn't you know it, her father is also being held captive because he tried to take Rose and she takes his place, a la Beauty and the Beast. I liked the concept of it. The thing is, this book doesn't necessarily feel like it needed to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I go into more depth in the review, obviously, but a lot of the points that were clearly meant to be Beauty and the Beast homages kind of just felt shoved in, and considering how gigantic this book is, the relationship felt a little rushed. And on top of that, again, we had more overly stilted, overly formal writing styles. The big example I used in that review was there was a moment where big things were happening, and the healer Kelleth is moving in such a way that is both agonized and cautious. But the writing style does not write it as Kelleth's movements were agonized and cautious, or Kelleth moved with agony and caution. It had it like agony and caution were the dominant traits in Kelleth's movement. Like, it had that kind of, you're in college writing an essay and it has a minimum word count and you want to sound smart. Like that kind of writing. And that also really padded out the runtime. And I never hold it against the book for being long. I have reviewed books upwards of like 800, 900 pages on this channel. But when it is that long, when you are breaking 600 pages, everything needs to flow. Everything needs to count towards something. Anything that feels extraneous in a book that long will make the entire book feel even longer, and that's what this book struggled with. So I will not be continuing with this series, but if you do like a more high fantasy evil empire, we have to plot to defeat them type of plotting, I guess, in your fantasy romances, definitely check this one out. And up next, probably one of the books I hated the most of this entire year so far. The book I had to DNF because the idea of reading the last 100 pages just sounded too awful, and that is Blood Circus by Camilla Victoire. This one is a YA dystopian sci-fi straight out of the Hunger Games era. It name drops the Hunger Games as a reference crossed with Children of Blood and Bone. This was written by someone who had actually been in the circus, and that's what I got it for. I was like, ooh, I want like a circus-based YA from someone that was in a circus. That sounds really cool. It's all about a world where in the far future we have, destroyed the planet, as we do, and these things called clunes have suddenly come out of the woodwork. They've apparently been here the entire time, but their bodies, like their nails and their blood and their bones, are actually really good at like fertilizing the earth and are super proteins for humans to eat. So humans and clunes have been like going at it, and our protagonist ends up getting kidnapped by them and forced to participate in the blood games. Okay, cool, fine. Right off the bat, this book is so dated. It's very dated in its writing style. Like, up into the protagonist gets out of bed and is like standing in a mirror describing herself. Levels of dated YA. But fine, whatever, that could just be like an aesthetic choice, right? What really infuriated me were the very blatant moral messages this book was trying to get across. Because this book is very clearly one of those, all humans are the problem and how do not all humans see that they are destroying the world. The more I get into eco-friendly aspects, and I have gotten hardcore into eco-friendly aspects, I have not gotten a single piece of clothing that is not from a thrift store in years. My literal dish soap comes out of an old olive oil container, levels of eco-friendly. I hate this message. To death, I hate this message. Because no, it is not an all-human problem. It is a capitalism corporation problem, okay? There are so many humans trying so hard to fight back for the earth, okay? No, it is not an all humans are doing the wrong thing. It is a the humans in power are doing the wrong thing because it benefits them. But I will climb off the soapbox. The big issue I had with this is that this message, this pro-earth message, comes out of the mouth of the antagonist, the megalomaniac doing horrible, evil things, forcing people to participate in the blood games. Supervillain is supposed to be the voice of reason. You're making the eco-friendly politics sound like a villain's monologue? How does that... It was so weird because it name drops Hunger Games as its reference. And no one in Hunger Games is like, oh, maybe the Capitol had a good idea, that President Snow, like, he's a visionary. Like, no one thinks that. You're not supposed to side with the people running the death games. The people running the death games are not supposed to be the voice of reason. And then also, complete side note, there was a trans character, like egg cracked on page, and then it implies that they're better off dead. Because, well, the world just isn't accepting enough. Fuck you, no. That is the mental reasoning that gets actual trans people killed. Fuck off. And then the last straw was during one of the villain's monologues, he was fucking talking about, anti-vax shit. And the protagonist was like, when I was going through all of that severe mental illness and my adopted mother refused to give me meds, she must have been in the right for it. Fuck off. Complete fuck off. Oh my god. I was so pissed. And if you would like more of my ranting, including some spoilers that really infuriated me, I will have that down in the description below. You can also watch me organize my office. But I replaced that with Taken by the Alien Next Door by Tiffany Roberts. This is a kind of contemporary alien romance about a woman who moves in next door to this alien that is taken with her because true mates, and plot happens and he ends up, to keep his own secret from the world, has to like kidnap her, but also wants to like woo her. It's not like the best premise. I'm not going to continue with this series, but for all of its faults, and I know I'm not talking about the book that much, the thing that stuck out to me the most about this book was actually the author's note at the end. Because Tiffany Roberts, in the author's note, they talked about how it had been such a struggle for them because this book was written in 2020 and how they were about to give up writing forever, and they were writing this because it was the only thing that they, like, it was definitely a writing to keep writing type of thing, like the book they had to write to prevent giving up writing forever. And that was really interesting to me because this one was published shortly before Ensnared was. And Ensnared is the big spider alien book, and that's the book that took off for them. That book got 3 times as popular, judging based on the Goodreads review count, as this book. And so it was so interesting to see the low point the author pair got to before hitting it and making it big again with an alien romance. And I love that kind of thing where it's like, you can push through and succeed. That's wonderful. The actual book itself was okay. It was all right. Honestly, it was that author note that stuck out to me at the end. And I did read it very quickly, which I liked because I had put in so many hours into the audiobook for Blood Circus. I fucking bought the audiobook for that book. I'm so pissed. I almost never buy audiobooks, and I had to do it for one of my most hated books of the year. Are you kidding me? But regardless, it got the book count done. It was over 400 pages, so I got that prompt finished. So we still got the dirty win, and that's what I needed up from it. Now, calming down and moving on. And I can think of no better way to calm down than by talking about The Dragon Prince of Alaska by Elva Birch. You may remember this is the one I had to fill the shifter romance prompt, and I actually had to go out and find it because shockingly I didn't have any shifter romances on standby. Very strange for me, but I'm so glad I did because this might be a new favorite series. So far, I've actually already read book 2. This is all about a alternate universe in which Alaska is its own standing monarchy, and it is ruled by a set of dragon brothers, specifically 7. And there is a magical contract, a magical treaty between all of the small kingdoms, aka the small hidden shifter kingdoms, who have to have a mate before they can take the throne. The brother's father, the king, has been in like a magical dragon slumber for a really long time, and they're like, crap, the accords, the next time we must renew this treaty is coming up when we don't have an official king. Well, the youngest brother finds his mate, and according to their traditions, that makes him first in line for the throne, but he's gone from being the absolute youngest, I think, of 7 to now being first in line. And the magic of the true mate bond in this was so interesting because it's not a standard true mate bond as the genre usually has it. It is actually a case of the compact uses magic essentially to jump ahead in time and give the mates the feelings they will eventually have at the beginning. So they look at the person for the first time and they suddenly feel attraction and they feel safe around them and they feel they can trust them for a reason they don't understand. And yes, they can feel each other's emotions a little bit, but that fades. So basically the compact says, okay, you will feel like this in the future. So we're just gonna have you feel it a little bit right now to get the ball rolling. And I love that aspect. I thought that was a really cool way of both having true mates but still reaffirming that this is just a solid romance in itself without the magic. But what I really like is that the setup for this series seems to be that every brother is going to find his true mate, but it's starting from the youngest and going up through. So, for example, the next book that I read had the 6th youngest brother finding his mate, and she was disabled, disability rep. We love it. And in that case, so now he's like, crap, now I'm in line for the throne. And I love this. I want to watch every single one of these lovable dumbass dragon princes finding out that, oh crap, now you're the one in line for the throne. Have a ball when they never expected to be. Like, I love that. I love that it didn't start with the oldest and basically everyone's like, okay, no, he would be the best king, but apparently the magic is saying this person's gonna be king now. Okay. And of course there is like a big existential threat, because if there isn't a king for Alaska by the time the Accords are like redone or whatever, then they won't be in kingdom anymore, and someone else can swoop in and steal up all of their, very fertile land and oil, because Alaska. Like, I love that. It's a big threat spanning all of the books, and I'm so excited to keep reading them. I actually skipped ahead in my TBR challenge. I didn't have a slot open, but I just wanted to read the next one so bad that I read it anyway. That's how much I loved this. This is probably going to be another top of my list shifter romance, and it actually bums me out that I have to like hold off and be a good kid and read other review books and stuff first, but chef's kiss, highly recommend. Up next, The Unbroken by C.L. Clark. This is a flintlock fantasy all about a woman who was originally kidnapped from her land as a child and brainwashed into being a soldier for an evil empire. And she comes back to that land with the princess, which is a colony now, and still on the side of the evil empire. And she doesn't really feel like Khazal is home. Her only real family in her eyes is her fellow conscripts called Sands. And she wants to fight just for them, but finds herself torn between the rebellion and the empire. We have a princess named Luca, who we also, disability rep, thank you. She is trying to prove to her uncle that she can get the colony in line so that when she goes back home, she can take the throne, because, said uncle is evil, because uncle is always evil in a fantasy book, obviously. Now, they begin a romance, because yes, we have yet more messy sapphics. This is just the month for it. I'm living. But their relationship is so twisted, because you have Terrain, who is fighting amongst a million different alliances that seemingly are constantly trying to split her apart, and you have Luca, who in true white woman fashion, and I say this as one of the Cloud sisters, thinks she's helping, thinks she's the good guy, but is still 100% trying to maintain colonialism. But she's like, but I don't want to be evil to the colony. I still want them to be our colony, but I don't want to be mean to them, like that kind of stuff. And the arguments and the messiness, there's a lot of gore, a lot of death, named character death, magic, but twisted magic, like it's chef's kiss. It actually reminded me a lot of The Thousand Names by Django Wexler, a book that is also a flintlock fantasy, the first one of which takes place in a desert land with the battle lesbian I Dream of Being as one of the leads. But that book never really dealt with the fallout of colonialism, whereas this one like stares it in the face. I loved how dramatic things got. I love how dramatic and angsty and melodramatic they got between Terrain and Luca. Like, it's great. I love, there's moments where you see Luca kind of falling into her worst evil empire instincts despite her insistence that she's better. Like, it's so good. And I thought this was a duology, but then I saw that it's actually like a full series. I don't know how many books yet, but at least I figured it out this time, because you would not believe how often I have assumed that like a book was either the last one in the series, but no, there's books beyond it, or assumed that there was books beyond it, but it was the last one. I can never seem to keep track of the series that I read, but at least I know now I've got more than just the next one and this one, and I will read them because it was awesome, and I'm kind of bummed that it took me this long to get to it. And lastly, I did it! I read it! These Gossamer Strings by Allegra Pescatore. This was the book that I was determined to read this year and kept pushing off because it was nearly 700 pages. But this is the third book in the Last Gift arc trilogy. It's kind of strange the way that this is set up, because this is supposed to be its own arc. The first 3 books are like its own arc, but then technically the plot is going to continue in other books. But basically, I get the gist that like the main characters of this book won't be the main characters of the next arc. Like their personal arcs are done, but there's still a big threat that people will go to moving on, I think. But I was pushing this one off because I knew it was going to be a lot. The second one in the series, I kind of chided for having weird pacing because next to nothing happens in that book, despite the fact that it's also very long. And in all honesty, looking back, I don't know how else you could have written it differently, because you kind of need a whole bunch of relationships and plans set in place for everything that goes down in this book. Because from about, give or take, the halfway mark onwards, it is all gigantic plot things. Like, they have the "it is time, we must do the thing" at like the halfway mark. And again, this book is like just shy of 700 pages. So there's several hundred pages of reveals and schemes coming to fruition and explosions and like other big reveals and reunions. Like a whole bunch of stuff goes down in several hundred pages, one right after the other. I think a full 100 pages is just the same 24-hour period. Like that's how much stuff is going down at the end. So looking back, I don't know that you could have put that much into the second book. And because I kind of critiqued it like that, I didn't take away a star for something I might have otherwise taken away a star for, because this book might have jumped the shark. And obviously I can't tell you why because plot, but a big reveal of like a hidden behind the scenes thing no one else knew. I'm like, okay, I am giving you the benefit of the doubt, Allegra, that you have plans for this. Because I doubted you in book 2, I took off the star and then it paid off. So I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt this time that this will pay off. But yeah, I'm a little skeptical. Regardless, I did get the practical polyamory ending that I was hoping for. And I'm not going to tell you who all is in what is effectively a polycule, but it was very much that, we all, we may all be group love. Like it's not a full group like say in the Catherine Moon series, but it is very much well, I love them and they love you, so you're one of my people now, even if I don't necessarily even like you. Like that kind of thing. It is that we are agreed that we are all connected through love, even if it's weird and kind of fucked up and some of the marriages are political and that kind of thing. And I liked that. I like that practical, yeah, we love each other, but we're also nobility that have been raised to expect arranged marriages, so we're going to go through with it. That kind of thing. And of course, the threat hanging over everyone's head is big. I have a guess as to who our big main character players are going to be moving forward, purely based on the side characters that still have things up in the air for them moving forward. And I'm really excited for that in general. A fantastic end to the arc. I have not filmed the whole review yet as of filming this, so I highly doubt it will be out by the time this is out, but when it is, hopefully I will remember to come back and put the link in the description because it is just so good. So that was June. I didn't read as much as I've read other months, but you know what? I had the wisdom teeth removal, I had an SEA trip, and I had the usual summer haze, and I still got all those chunky books read, so I'm proud of myself. But now going into July, I am going to try my hand at a thing. I want to try recreating the original booktubeathon with the original prompts. And it's pretty intense because the original booktubeathon had a prompt to read 300 pages a day. Can you imagine a modern readathon that would have that? Regardless, I already have my TBR set up for that, so my hope is I can fit as many of those books as possible onto the month's TBR, to the extent that I have already written out what prompts each of the books would work for, just to make sure I can get it on to the best of my knowledge. However, I also have some super anticipated books coming out in July. Some of my big monster romance anticipated reads are coming out, so I really, really hope I can fit those in. And of course, I need to do reviews. So thankfully, because I had 3 review books read in June, I will get 1 re-roll. However, I am not going to be the one rolling. I have my lovely assistants who have not arrived yet as of me filming this, but they have already volunteered to help Aunt Margaret roll for her TBR game, and we'll see what they come up with. So I have my 2 helpers here who have volunteered to help Aunt Margaret roll her game for the day. Now, I am rolling with advantage, which is a very big word. But that just means that you're both going to roll, and we're going to take the higher number. Now I know you know your numbers really well, so you can help me tell which one is higher, right? Okay, so why don't you go first? You roll the first one. And what do we get?
11.
Awesome. All right, your turn. Do you know what number that is?
No.
It is an 8. So which is higher, 11 or 8?
11.
Good job. Shh, don't tell the little helpers, but I'm actually re-rolling that one. Okay. So despite the fact that I re-rolled a lot lower, it actually works out in my favor because 2 is attached to the prompt classic, which is also one of the prompts in Booktubeathon. So I went with Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This is a classic both of Black literature and science fiction, and it is considered one of the big mainstays of specifically Black science fiction. And it is all about a young Black woman in the 1970s who is mysteriously transported back in time to the antebellum South. And every time she's mysteriously transported back, she stays longer, and her life is essentially put more in danger. I have had this on my shelf for forever. I've repeatedly told myself I'm going to read it, but I kept pushing it off because it's really dark topics. So now I'm going to read it as part of a readathon where I will probably end up having to read it in a day to catch up. It is only 260 pages, give or take. However, in my copy, the text is pretty dense, so I don't know how fast it'll read, especially because it is a classic. Now, it is a classic from the 1970s, so it's not like ye olde English style classics. But again, we are dealing with some pretty tough literature here. A lot of the reviews and talks about things like it will shatter you. So, gotta prepare myself. And thankfully, the rest of this TBR is looking to be a lot lighter, so I will have the emotional bandwidth left over for what this is gonna do to me. All right, why don't you start us this second time? And what's our number?
9.
Awesome. And then your turn, you roll. What is it?
2.
So which one is bigger?
9.
Yeah! All right, 9 is attached to the prompt middle grade, and I actually have a review book on my list for this, and that is Wasteland Woes by Isaac Cook Khan. This is a fairly short middle grade, all about 2 siblings who get separated in the fallout of an apocalypse and essentially have to survive and get back to each other. It is super short, I think like 60-some pages, so I'll definitely read this in a day, which is nice. And in general, I'm interested to see how middle grade apocalypse pans out, but I do love like sibling love stories, so I'm hoping to like this one. Round 3. And what number?
19.
Yeah. All right. And what's that number?
20.
20? That's the best number you can get. Which one is bigger?
20.
Yeah. And we have a nat 20. That is, of course, Monster Romance. So for this, I picked another one of the ones off my Booktubeathon TBR, and I went with Bound by Tiffany Roberts. This is the 3rd book in its trilogy, so I can't really tell you a lot because, the ending of book 2. But this is that classic giant spider alien romance that has gone around the monster romance circles, got picked up a lot by TikTok, and I adore it, even though it made me so anxious. I think I waited a year between books 1 and 2 because I knew book 2 was going to be like a little bit more intense, and then the book ended with like a cliffhanger so gigantic that the authors were apologizing in their author note. So I was really tempted to keep pushing this off, but nope, we're going to finish it out. I'm going to force myself. Unfortunately, I don't even have this technically owned yet, so I have to like read some other books to get the slot open, but I'm saving it for Booktubeathon, so I'll just focus on getting some slots open in the first week of the month and then hopefully getting it. But in general, not gonna lie, a little bit anxious about this one, but I need to see them get their HEA, so I'll push through. All right, round 3, no, 4. Aunt Margaret can count. All right, you want to start?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope.
Yep, it'll be your turn next. What you get? Let's look at the number. That's a 2. Okay.
I get 2.
You did. What's that number?
10.
Which one's bigger?
10.
Ooh, we're loud. The number 10 is for the prompt nonfiction, and I don't have a lot of these, but I knew the next time I got this prompt I was going to go with this one, and that is Not My Time to Die by Lily Setterdahl. This is a local author in my area who is a Swedish American, and she spent years researching specifically the Swedish passengers of the Titanic and how their specific cultural group reacted to it. I guess apparently there's like a lot of research been done on these people like in Sweden, like it's been a big deal there, but this is one of the biggest compilations outside of Sweden, supposedly, as I've been told from the marketing. But I went through a gigantic Titanic phase when I was a kid. I played in the orchestra for the musical at one point. Like, I got into it. Didn't really care as much about the movie because at the time, I was one of those, it's not historically accurate enough noobs. But I am excited to get into this one. I mean, more or less, you know, it is a disaster. Although there were 34 survivors and their stories are also told in here. So I'm hoping that the survivor stories will be enough to carry the emotional bandwidth of what the rest of it's going to do to me. I may not have picked as emotionally light TBR as I thought. And round 5. Want to start us off? What number?
19.
Ooh, some big rollers today. Okay, your turn. You know that number?
Yeah.
It's 3. Which one is bigger?
1983.
Ellie is 3. You're right. 19 is for the prompt queer author, and I went back to my review list and I picked A Lady to Treasure by Marion Ratcliffe. This is a sapphic Regency romance. I don't know much more about it than that. I just heard sapphic Regency romance and I was like, well, that's an automatic yes. Like, it wasn't even a question. I was gonna wait to review it for a little while longer because it doesn't come out until October, and sometimes if you put reviews out too soon, it doesn't really work. However, the other big queer author I have on my list has not actually gotten the physical book to me yet, and I didn't want to risk that it wouldn't come in July. So we're going with this one, and this is all about a young woman who has to come to court to get a rich husband because, you know, things aren't going well for the family, and another woman who at first thinks she despises this, you know, quote-unquote gold digger for principal reasons, but then realizes no, she doesn't want her to be married to anyone else. And I have no idea how this is going to go. I don't know if the world is queer norm in this book, or if they're going to find another way for an HEA. I assume so because it's a romance. Some way for an HEA outside of that. But I love Regency romances. However, I've mentioned this several times. A lot of the standard Regency romances are so samey that the details of any one of them will slip my mind the second I have finished it. I enjoy my time reading them, but then after, cannot recall a single thing. That's how samey these can get. So a queer sapphic Regency romance might stick out just enough to actually stick. So that's what I'm hoping for. Worst comes to worst, I can hold off on posting the review until a little bit later, you know, a month or two, just set the video to come out later or something like that. But I am really excited for this one. And round 6. Who wants to start us off?
Me.
Okie doke. What number?
13.
Excellent. Hey, your turn. I know the slinky is very alluring. Do you want to roll? And we got a... Oop, I just moved it, I think. Did you roll another 20?
Yeah.
Good job. And we have another 20. Another monster romance. And for this one, I went with one of my anticipated reads, Rook by Gillian Graves. This is a gargoyle romance, the second in its series, and it is all about yet another gargoyle falling in love with a human. And each of these, on top of also being a monster romance, deals with a different kink. And I believe this one deals with the primal kink, which I think I'll probably end up liking this one more than the first one because the first one had the daddy kink and that one I'm like iffy on. But this is, I believe, friends to lovers, so the human has been the gargoyle's essentially assistant for a while, and Rook has hidden his feelings for her. But when she insists on like ingratiating herself with the big bad to find out what's going on, Rook finds all of his protective instincts flaring, and I'm really excited. I loved the first one. I love the new slew of gargoyle romances coming out, and I am happy to get into this one. However, again, I don't have it yet. I'm gonna have to open up so many slots. Like, it's a lot. My TBR challenge has been iffy for me lately as I get closer and closer to that 50 book mark. But I will happily read a lot to get slots open for this one because I have genuinely been looking forward to it all year. Round 7. Who would like to start us off?
Me.
Not surprising. All right, roll for us. What'd you get?
10.
Good job.
Back.
All right, Slinky friend, your turn.
9.
What's the number? Can we see?
55.
15. So which is bigger, 10 or 15?
15.
Yeah, good job. Up next, 15 review book. For this one, I went with Bloodstained Rose by Angie Titus. I've had this on my review list for a while, and it's just never worked for any other prompt, so I'm glad I got this one. This is a supernatural / paranormal mystery where a young mystery writer kind of wants to escape having to solve crimes. I get the gist this is a series, but it's one of those episodic series so that you don't have to start from the first one. And she is going to take a break by going to care for her elderly uncle, and elderly uncle has a mansion. Well, our protagonist can see ghosts, and she starts seeing the ghost of this woman in white, and now she's pulled into yet another mystery. Because, of course, I really like the premise. I always like the seeing ghosts and solving mysteries aspect. It sounds spooky enough. And also, it's fairly short. It's only about 200 pages. Maybe the hunky detective from the synopsis will come back up. That's what I'm counting on. And who knows, if I like it, I can check out, like, some of the other stuff in the series, if it is a series. I may just be reading into the synopsis too much, but we'll see. And the very last round. What do we get? Let's go. You can roll. What'd you get?
20.
A 20!
Yee, Papa. Here we go.
Yep, last turn. You just put this Slinky on the table. Yep. Last turn. All right, can you see the number?
19.
19. So which is bigger?
9.
Which is?
20.
Yeah, good job. And lastly, another nat 20. The girls have the gift. And this is another monster romance. And so for this one, I picked another from my anticipated reads, Sanctuary with Kings by Catherine Moon. This is the third in its trilogy of tempting monsters, and it is all about a woman who finds herself in a polycule with many monsters. The first book introduced the concept, but was kind of low-key, plotless in a lot of cases. The second book really capitalized on what the first book introduced and upped the plot and really gave it a lot more character, and honestly is way better than the first in my opinion. So I'm hoping that that momentum continues. Now, this one is going to have some harder themes because it is dealing very, very directly with trafficking in a way that the first two books hinted at, had it as like a subtle thing, but this is, you are directly dealing with like the aftermath of, you know, trafficked victims becoming freed. So I am expecting a lot of talk on trauma. I'm expecting maybe some darker thoughts and that kind of thing, maybe some trigger warning stuff. However, I'm also expecting some fantastic monster sex scenes. So it is going to be long because the other two books in this series have all been upwards of 500 pages, but I am going to be enthralled with it. Pretty sure. Like, I was enthralled with the first two books. So I'm really excited for this one. Again, I'm going to have to open another slot in my TBR. I really do think I'm getting close to the time when my TBR is restricting more than it's helping, but I'll have to think about that a little bit more. So that is it. That is my TBR for July. I am really excited about it. Got a lot of books that I was hoping to get in. I'm really nervous because I still have to fit in other books with the Booktubeathon, but I also have to just read so much in that week. Seriously, how did the community do that for so many years repeatedly? It just feels mind-boggling. Regardless, if you are interested in watching me try the Booktubeathon again 10 years later, please subscribe and stick around. And also, if you love monster romances as much as I do, stick around because that's a lot of what I read here. I'd like to give a big, gigantic thank you to my helpers. Do you want to wave to the people watching?
Yeah.
Mom is over there watching. I meant wave to the camera. But okay, I think we're done. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.